Okay, well, welcome to our 11th Tuesday chat. This is the State Council on Developmental Disabilities and the Sacramento Regional Office. And my name is Sonia Bingaman. I'm the manager of the Sacramento office for the State Council. And we cover 10 counties around Sacramento. That's Sacramento, Placer, Nevada, Sierra, Alpine, El Dorado, Yuba, Sutter, Colusa, and Yolo counties. And we have 12 offices around the state. Our headquarters is in Sacramento, and we are all responding to the coronavirus pandemic and people needing to work from home and stay at home and schools being closed and adapting to a lot of changes. And so we thought the topic for today's chat, which we'll talk about in a minute, would be a really important one for many of us who are adjusting to our new normal routines at home and trying to find those routines. So I wanted to introduce my colleague, Kathy Bryan.
Hi there, I'm Kathy Bryan, and I work alongside Sonia as a CPS2 in the office, and it's great to have you on this chat, and nice to meet you as I see new faces. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, and Kathy's going to be monitoring the chat as well as letting people into the call. If you have a question, a technical issue about the call, please feel free to put it in the chat. Kathy will monitor that. And then if you have a question, you're welcome to type it into the chat, a question for Deirdre, type it into the chat, or in a little bit, we'll open it up to questions and discussion. And so you're welcome to just ask your question yourself as well. If it's easier for you to type it in just so you have it there as a reminder, you can do that. Wanted to go back a little bit to the State Council and what we do. We are established by state and federal law as an independent state agency to ensure that people with developmental disabilities have access to the services that they're entitled to by law and that are just right for people with developmental disabilities to have equal access to all of the supports and services in our community. We do a lot that focuses on inclusion and people having equal access to school and jobs and places to live and places to recreate and have fun, people who want to lead a full life in the community. And so we work on a lot of different fronts. Kathy and I go to a lot of meetings normally in the community and in person, collaboratives and efforts reaching out to different organizations, focusing on a lot of different topics, including housing and healthcare and education and self-advocacy and what have I forgotten, Kathy? Healthcare, pretty much every aspect of someone's life that touches their life. And we try to get our fingers in just about everything. A lot of what we do is informing and sharing information with family members about their rights, sharing information so that they have the tools necessary to advocate for themselves and their loved one and their family members, as well as directly with individuals who have developmental disabilities, helping them to learn their rights so they can advocate for themselves. So we have our fingers in a lot of different things. Since coronavirus has put a lot of us working from home, and a lot of folks not in their programs and not in their schools, we've been using Zoom and other platforms to try to reach and connect with communities. And because of this platform, we're able to invite people from all over the state. So welcome to a few of you who registered, who are from the Los Angeles or San Diego area. The things we're talking about are applicable statewide. So we welcome all of you and thank you for joining us. We also encourage you to reach out and be connected with your local state council offices in your area as well. So today we are fortunate to have Deirdre Fitzgerald with Achievement by Design, and she's going to talk about some practical solutions for sleep and waking routines and helping to create good routines and patterns within your family to promote sleep and rest for all of us. So we're going to go ahead and just, okay, so the light just shined. I have a little more light on my face. So Deirdre, go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us a little about you and your background.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So Sonia and Kathy, thank you for setting these up. This has been such a great resource for the community, and I am here in my home like the rest of you, so I'll apologize in advance for barking dogs in the neighbor's yard and lawnmowers and other things that go by. My name is Deirdre Fitzgerald. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I have a private company where I support individuals, families, and organizations. My work encompasses a number of environments, and so I go everywhere from the school to the home and to the community to help where the needs are. So many of you might have a behavior analyst in your life, and you know we go where the challenges are and the learning opportunities are. So we find ourselves in many situations. And I know as we've all found ourselves in the middle of this coronavirus health crisis, one of the situations we've found ourselves in is at home with very altered routines. And as we're hearing from families and agencies and even professionals about the needs that individuals are experiencing with this sudden change and very different requirements brought upon parents and caregivers, it felt very timely to discuss some ways to tackle some of the challenges both with sleeping and waking routines. And so I just wanted to open the discussion today with a little invitation to each of you. I will discuss 3 different strategies, 2 built into one, and I will give you a brief introduction to each of them. When we're done with our discussion today, I do have a couple links that I will share with the chat so that if you have additional questions to follow up, you'll be able to do that, and how to reach me if I haven't addressed your question today. But I also want to make sure that you know that you have the opportunity to reach out and address a concern. We'll do our best with the information we can do today. And I welcome the caveats that may come with each of your environments. So that's kind of the introduction.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be here with all of us. So it's summertime, school's out. Why do we need to worry about a certain routine? Isn't it okay if the kids stay up all night, or we stay up all night, you know, doing whatever we do? Why is it important to focus on having a routine, a sleeping and waking routine?
This is a great question, and I know this is something that a lot of families are struggling with. And I know for younger individuals that even are used to a kind of a more typical summer season, we went from school ending very quickly with our face-to-face contact to very different online models. So some of you in your different regions might have experienced a synchronous online model, meaning that you were meeting with your teachers through remote learning at particular times. But many of the families here in California moved to an asynchronous model, which is interesting because what we're hearing from students is a lot of their learning was asynchronous, meaning they're logging on when they can to access materials that are waiting for them. But many parents, professionals, and caregivers are in synchronous models where we need to be somewhere at a very particular time, as in our meeting today. And so that's a real conflict that a number of families had experienced during the transition to distance learning. And I know that while that schools are technically on summer break, many individuals are still receiving summer services, extended year programming, and making sure that we have a year-round schedule, which is something that many of you might have worked very hard to establish prior to this health crisis. Maintaining that schedule through these very changed times and changed routines is something that will help us at other points in the day. And so it really turns out that keeping our times of activity consistent keeping the amount of time. So we're finding that in anecdotal reports, we're finding a lot of school age individuals are sleeping less hours because they actually are staying up later, or their sleep-wake schedules have been pushed so that school age individuals in particular are staying up much later and then sleeping in much later. And we know our bodies just respond very well to a predictable routine. So keeping those times of day and amount of time that we spend in activities consistent at a year-round basis is something that many of you might have worked hard to establish prior to this pandemic. And now that we're here, and even though it technically is a summer break, keeping those up promotes health and wellness across the day. So, and many of you might be at home thinking of things that you're doing differently with your time. And so we're probably all a little guilty of that.
Yes, some of us might be at home with our teenagers who won't be waking up for several hours from now.
Right, right.
What can a caregiver do to help someone go to sleep?
When we look at research and we survey families and caregivers, we find that the sleeping and waking routines are some of the most stressful throughout the day for parents and caregivers alike. And so there are a number of strategies that we can employ to reduce the conflict during these times. But also my goal always as a behavior analyst is to help that learner be more successful. And so although making the family time more harmonious is a fantastic outcome, helping that person, regardless of age, and I'll tell you that the strategies we'll talk about today can be employed across a number of age ranges, home setting types. So if you have a particular situation and you want to know how to kind of modify it for your world, I'm happy to take that question as we move forward. But one of the things that's been found to be very effective in getting our youth or adults, young adults alike, to actually go to sleep more readily is a strategy called the bedtime pass. And I want to take one step back and just tell you how we learned about this bedtime pass. Many parents and many of you might in your home lives, not just in your professional lives, think of times where getting a child or a person in your care to bed at a particular time was a challenge. And so not just establishing the rule or the goal for bedtime, but actually succeeding in getting them into bed. And we might think of the classic, may I have one more drink of water? Will you read one more story? I just need one more hug, or the one that I'm particularly vulnerable to, my stuffed animal needs a hug. And so many of these fantastically cute and heartwarming strategies that people in our lives might use to extend the bedtime event is something that you guys might have all kinds of wonderful stories to share. And what we found is that when we do research even on infants, and many of you might have had experience with an infant in your life at some point, waking you at a variety of time too, that a lot of the behaviors that we have that kind of bring us back as caregivers are behaviors that get us to provide additional attention. And one of the things that attention can do, especially in the nighttime period, is extend the duration of the bedtime event. And so when we look at research in some families, and this is particularly true of families of children with special needs, that the bedtime event, this is after we've kind of brushed teeth and done hygiene behaviors and gotten them actually physically to their bed space, that bedtime event of getting them to their space until they get to sleep can be up to 2 hours in some cases. And for parents and professionals supporting families and caregivers, this is not only a big challenge to tackle because it impacts our health, as we talked about before. It can be stressful, and it can also be something that, because we too, as the caregiver, need our sleep, we might do things that continue that event's duration. And so the bedtime pass was researched initially to try to decrease this window of time. How long does it take from the time we get our person to their bed area at the appropriate bedtime to when they actually fall asleep and stop calling the parent back? And the bedtime pass is a very simple strategy. What it is it's a pass. Literally, we create either a piece of paper or whatever kind of symbol would be appropriate for that person. And so I've seen learners that use picture exchange systems have a picture exchange. I've seen families use the hotel door hangers. I've seen a whole variety of symbols, but what it is we teach the learner that you get a certain number of times you can call me back as the parent or caregiver, and you cash in for that return visit by giving me your token or your symbol. And so if, for example, I've given you a card that says I can call mom back for a hug or a story or whatever it is, and we'll limit the duration of that return, I kind of pay for that or exchange that with my pass. And I limit the number of times that can happen. One of the really neat things and why I like to share the bedtime pass with parents and caregivers is that the research on this is so interesting, where the strategy of just providing the person the knowledge that they can call you back, because usually calling me back is in a lot of ways discouraged, right? So we'll say, now you need to do this on your own, or lights are out, or no more talking, or whatever the routines and rules are. But providing this pass actually provides the knowledge that you really will come back. So it's almost like a guarantee. Whereas when I call you, or, and sometimes there might be crying or, other behaviors that are very distressful for the parent and the person, right? Just knowing that I can have you when I want you, and that it's a guarantee, and we can talk about the proper number of passes. It varies person to person and family to family. Sometimes a situation requires 2 or 3 passes, and then we try to whittle down over time. The ideal is to give that person 1 pass eventually that they can exchange now for a guaranteed return visit. And what we find a lot of times is they'll use it for a number of nights in a row, and then they start to stockpile that pass, to see that pass. It becomes something that I know you're here, and I don't need you right now at 9:15 when you just put me to bed at 9 o'clock. But I might really need you at 11. So I'm gonna hold on to this. And a lot of times just that we're finding allows the person to actually go to sleep and relax and know that you will come for this pass. It's such a neat counterintuitive strategy, and it really puts the control for this bedtime interaction in the hands of the sleeper, right? Of our person that we're trying to tuck down to sleep, instead of the parent or caregiver being the one that decides how many times I'll come or under what circumstances I'll come. It really gives the person, the sleeper in this case, the power to dictate when you will come, and you can decide what I exchange it for. Do I want a hug? Do I want a story? You know, whatever it is. So it's just a fantastically accessible strategy across a number of environments, and it's just got fantastic efficacy. So I'd love to hand this one out.
Yeah, it sounds like you could have different methods depending on the individual's communication skills of how they would contact the parent, right? Maybe.
Exactly, and that's something that you know, we can decide how we go back and forth between some of the topics today. If at the moment we want to talk about how to customize that, we could do that, or just the idea alone is enough. I know I see some of you taking notes, and
Yeah.
you know, you might have the light bulb already going off, knowing what works in your situation. But I'm happy to talk about how we could make that a good match for the person's verbal skills. And often, if you've heard of things like token economies or token systems in the past, I know probably you're a very sophisticated audience with those skills. We want to make it something that's interesting enough for the person that they know what its meaning is, but not so interesting that they don't want to give it up. So I don't use, you know, a favorite stuffed animal as the pass, or, you know, a Matchbox car, which would be disruptive or something like that. So usually something that's appropriate for the communication style. And that could mean for some people that use a communication device even. It could be a device, you know, something as simple as a Go Talk button that has programmed into it. So this can really vary how we use it. When we can have that person participate in the creation of the pass, that's a really fabulous element. So do you want a picture of the parent or caregiver that you're calling back? And you can trade that with the parent or caregiver for the actual person. So it'll vary on what's going to be most effective in that particular person's situation. So we do want to make it motivating, but it also meaningful for them.
Yeah, great ideas, and I love how they all would need to be customized and individualized depending on the person and the home environment situation and the caregiver situation. What happens about what happens about waking up in the middle of the night? How do you address that?
Waking up in the middle of the night is something that we're seeing a lot of concerns about, especially as we're in this very new health crisis, not only with our routines upset, but maybe our concerns about health and safety are elevated. And that, of course, is impacting all of our sleep. So sleep is a very interesting thing because our research on what works to help sleep happen better has such counterintuitive findings. So once you wake in the night, usually our strategy, or many adults, what their strategy is, I'll lay there until I go back to sleep. Almost everyone reports that that's their kind of go-to solution for nighttime waking. And it turns out for the first waking and for a very short duration, so if it's a momentary waking, meaning usually a very brief duration, less than a minute. So I pop my head up, I look around, but I stay in my bed area. And this would be for the people that we're caring for as well. We want to think about how long are they waking. If it's a brief waking, usually no interventions required. But if it's that 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm wide awake, nighttime waking, which again, many people are reporting experiencing themselves, not just the people they're caring for. The counterintuitive, most effective solution is actually to get out of bed. So when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, instead of laying in bed, and this is again after you've passed that brief window, and again, that brief window might be different for each of us, so we can talk about that meaningful. But if we just think of ourselves for a minute, because I'm certain that everyone in the room has experienced this at some point, where in the middle of the night, your brain decides it's morning and wants to do your to-do list. Getting up and working on that to-do list, in fact, picking the most unpleasant or preferred task on the list. So I always mention to people that doing the dishes in the middle of the night or mopping the floor in the middle of the night, even though that sounds like, because many people say, well, I'll try to be still, or I'll try to be quiet, or I'll try not to move around very much. What works best for nighttime wakings to get you right back to sleep is to pick something you really don't prefer, and not something terrible, but like, I don't love mopping the floor. And so getting out the mop and doing a good vigorous mopping is actually a fantastic way for you to, number one, end that sleep-wake cycle. It's very counterintuitive because many people think, well, if I'm active, I'm going to keep myself awake. But there's a funny little trick that happens for us. When you say, okay, now that you're up, let's get a job done, all of a sudden, you're very, very, very tired. Because sleeping sounds way better than mopping, or doing the dishes, or some other task like that. So don't get out the leaf blower. It's not that kind of a thing, but a task that doesn't wake the rest of the household and actually doing a task. So this is something that's a real easy example for many of us as the adult or caregiver in a household. This is the same for young or individuals in our care. And so if they are wide awake in the middle of the night, it is okay to get up and to do a task. So if that means I didn't get all my games stacked before I went to bed, then stacking the games is an okay thing to be doing. Or if I needed to take my laundry to the laundry room, or any kind of task like that. So, and this is in contrast to a preferred task like getting up and watching television. We know that that is a really ineffective way to get ourselves back to sleep. Also having that midnight snack, also another ineffective way to get ourselves back to sleep, because usually isn't your midnight snack something tasty like ice cream? It's okay, you don't have to admit if you're guilty of that. And so if you tell yourself, when I get up in the middle of the night, I'm gonna get ice cream, doesn't getting up in the middle of the night sound great? And so that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something that is that task you're stalling on, like putting all the shoes back in the shoe basket, or folding towels. And so how could we translate that to just a task, a low priority or low preferred task that we can take care of? And we want it to be a shortened duration task. The other thing about this nighttime waking, where you're required to do a task, you will find that when people engage in the task, very, very quickly, they report being tired and wanting to go back to bed. And so it is perfectly okay to head right back to bed. So this doesn't need to be a long task, and you're not trying so much to get the task done, but to tell your whole routine, if I'm up, I have to do something productive. And immediately, most often we find within 1 to 2 minutes of engaging in that task, people report heading right back to bed and sleeping soundly. So it's an interesting, counterintuitive trick. Works for us too.
Sounds like that mopping's never going to get done.
Yeah, those socks that you keep meaning to fold.
What about people who have a hard time getting up in the morning?
Yeah, and this is a consequence sometimes of a defective bedtime routine, some kind of issue in the routine, but sometimes that's not it. And we are finding, again, a lot of reports in individuals who are used to going to school and having a day program and having a ride to be ready for all those things that because those cues and routines and the expectations to be ready for the carpool or whatever it is, all those are disrupted during this pandemic time. We're finding a lot of people that are really struggling with the waking routines. And so first and foremost is going back to the schedule. So I should mention that with the bedtime routines too, keeping the same bedtime every day, all year round. It doesn't mean you can't bend it for a birthday party or a special event, but trying to keep to that same time expectation for going to sleep and for waking up every day, all year round, summer or not, distance learning or not, schedule changes or not. So keeping that same expectation, and if we've gotten off that expectation, as you were mentioning, some people, and we're finding a lot of very young kids right now that schools are reporting when they're doing summer check-ins, very young kids that are normally wide awake first thing in the morning. Some parents are even concerned sometimes at how wide awake they are, how early in the morning. It's just the opposite right now. We're finding that a lot of our waking routines have been flipped too. So we've got even very young kids, not just our notorious teenagers, sleeping in late. So number one, setting the expectation, having the time schedule. And if we've gotten far away from that time, taking us back gradually, maybe 15 minutes a day for the next number of days until we head back to that typical expectation is important. That also means, again, adjusting the nighttime routine to make sure we're getting a sufficient amount of sleep to support that morning routine. But some people that are getting their full night's sleep are still sleeping in. So having that waking expectation and then combining that with a goal for the day that we earn at the end of the day for completing our waking routine at the expected times. So let's say we take our sleep in time, whatever that's turned into now, and we make it 15 minutes earlier tomorrow. And that's my goal for tomorrow. And in addition to that, I have one thing, one achievement that I'd like to make tomorrow. And this can be big or small. So I'm going to color a page in a coloring book, or I'm going to do an activity in an online learning program, or I'm going to have a online interaction with a peer from my day program. And so we've set the expectation for a timing, we've set a goal for what we'll do, and we also want to set a reward, a reinforcer for that attainment. And you should get that at the end of, we might call it our work day or our school day or our scheduled day. So we pick a time, so let's say 5 p.m. And at 5 p.m., when I've met my wake-up goal and I've tackled my achievement for today, I get access to whatever that preferred event was. And so if it's time with a toy or time with a video that's preferred, or an interaction with a preferred person, we're limited in our community scope right now, so I would encourage those things that we earn to be things that are available in the home setting. So the trip to McDonald's that you used to take is maybe not advisable, but if there's a special game that you wanted to play, or there's some other privilege that they gain access to as a result of meeting those daily goals, that really helps with our waking routine. Not only the time expectation, but the goal followed by the reinforcer for meeting that goal. So those steps help us get up and get moving. And then as we use our effective sleep strategies in the evening, that gives us the healthy, timely rest that we need to be ready to do that again tomorrow. And as we're tapering closer and closer to our normal schedule, and again, I would do it in tiny increments, usually 15 to 30 minutes. If you feel like you can make the big leap and do a 30-minute expectation change, that I'm going to get up 30 minutes earlier tomorrow to get myself back to my routine, then that's what works. If it's difficult, then keeping it there for a few days at that same expectation while you acclimate to it, and making that goal something that is readily attainable. So today, if I make the expectation that I log on to a meeting with my pals and have a 30-minute catch-up, that's an attainable expectation. So I don't want the daily goal to be tied with something that's too difficult, like I'm going to get that 40-page report written today. That might be a lot. So making that daily goal attainable, making it small enough that we can make these moves gradually is very important.
Thank you, Deirdre. Those are all really great suggestions. I see it's 10:41, so I want to open it up to the group, and anyone has questions, and then we can just continue on based on the questions. But I want to make sure we have time for that. So anyone who has a question, I don't see any chats, but please feel free to just go off of mute and ask any specific questions you have.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I had a question when you were saying, like, with the tokens, like letting your child call you back in your room. Like, how many would you recommend?
So these are very individualized, and so usually we would do kind of an interview, myself and yourself in here. How many times do they call you back at present? So what's a typical night? So just to give you an example, if we met and you said in a typical night, I'm called back 4 times in a 60-minute period, and that's pretty consistent. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 3, but almost every day I can guarantee there are going to be about 4 callbacks. Then I might have you start with 3 as your, so we make the expectation less than what you're getting now, but we're also giving them the control. So it's there are 2 things that are going on. So that's a kind of a for example. If you want to get more specific, you're welcome to, and we can try to think about it.
Sorry, my son is.
Okay. Okay.
So then would you keep it, like, say if it was the 4 and then you were to do 3, would you keep it at 3, or after like a month would you then go down to 2? So you would eventually try to wean them. Okay.
Yes. And usually we get to the point where we have just 1, And I will talk to families, for example, that have used the bedtime pass, and we had just one pass that we made it to, and they'll find that it's tucked into their nightstand or stuffed under a pile of pillows, and they haven't used it in 6 months or a year, but it's they still have it. And so, yeah, those are things that we do try to reduce the number of them. The other thing that might be appropriate, depending on the needs of your sleeper there, is, do we need to shorten the time window? So this, for some people, it's the frequency, how many times I've called you back. But for some people, it's the length of time. So I call you twice, but it's at 1 hour and 2 hour intervals, which means their sleep is very, very disrupted, as is yours as the parent, right? And so sometimes we will have an expiration of the amount of time on it as well. So it's made very personal to the situation that's happening in the household.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic questions. I'll give you some resources again at the end. I'll have those pasted in the chat for you.
Okay, great.
How to find me. So if you have follow-up questions, you're welcome to follow up.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Good question.
Does anybody else have a question? Please feel free to let yourself off of mute if you have a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Do you have any tips or tricks for a room that's being shared by 2 different age groups? So there's 2 different bedtimes, but the youngest won't go to sleep until the oldest goes to sleep.
Right. This is a very common concern as well. So with 2 different bedtimes and expectations in the same room, number one, it really helps to distinguish the expectations. And so, and this is something that you've probably already addressed, but if it's, let's say, a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old, they might have very different bedtimes, and probably also different amounts of homework or activities that they're permitted to do that are age appropriate for the 2 different ages. So I think one is really making those distinctions clear, that these are your expectations and these are yours. But then also making this bedtime pass available to the younger one, it sounds like in this case, is something that would be open only during the window between when, let's say, they were put down to bed at 8 p.m. and the older child went to bed at 9 p.m., just as examples. And so the bedtime pass might get the person, the parent or caregiver, called back during that window in between.
Okay.
To really help the younger child to know I'm still around in between. Is that part of what you were thinking? I know you've unmuted again, so I want to let
Yeah. They're a little bit closer to age, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because then they want you to stay in the room with them, the younger ones, until the older one comes. And then if you take the older one and say, hey, just go in the room, be quiet, sit on your bed, do whatever, then you still got the lights are on, I can't sleep, and it becomes a power struggle in the room.
Right. And there are some things, that was the next thing I was going to ask. We might take a look at the room to see if there are things we can do to make it easier for the early bedtime child to sleep. So can we make their part of the room darker with a cute little tent fort, or are there ways to just even point the light, or maybe even face the beds opposite directions? So sometimes just a change to the environment helps. Some things like noise or lighting So those could be changes as well. And
Okay.
one of the thoughts, and I don't know if this is the case with these two individuals, but having the parent or caregiver be the one to interact with the younger child instead of the sibling, because that way the parent or caregiver can decide what the expectations are a little bit better and be more consistent with those than another child might. So giving the older child the expectation that, you know, when if your younger brother or sister speaks up, I want you to not respond, and I will be the one. I'll be in charge. And so sometimes that means headphones or just giving them permission. It's okay to not say anything when your sister says, come rub my back or something like that. And then making sure they each have something of value that they're earning for following those expectations is also really helpful. So letting the older child know this is your new kind of set of expectations. And when you are able to follow them, because I know this is a challenge for you too, you get access to something that you enjoy, and for the younger child as well.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's a handful, and it's something that I think so many of us can empathize with, because this is a very common situation. So it's probably multiple things that get you down the right path.
Thank you, Deirdre. These are very individualized situations. I'm going to launch a poll real quickly, and then we'll have another 10 minutes to chat. So there should be a poll that shows up on your screen with a question, and if you can go ahead and just answer. Do you see one or two questions?
Two.
Okay, please answer both of them if you can. And everybody except Kathy should be able to participate. Okay, I think everybody who has wanted to has done that. I'm going to end the polling. I'm going to share the results. Wow, yay. Everybody's doing well. And just bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to take a picture of our screen, as we like to do that. Okay. All right, we are all set. Thank you for your patience with that. I'm going to close that out.
Neat.
Stop.
So if there are any other particular questions or funny stories that you want to share, I think we all have a funny bedtime story, or strategies that are working particularly well. One of the things that, as we're doing a lot of informal polling, and so I love to see your data collection there, Sonia. Warm place in my heart for that. As we're asking a lot of people about their experience during this time of stay-at-home orders, we're finding that almost across the board for age groups and work situations and a lot of different variables, people are having difficulty with the sleeping and waking schedules. And there are just so many changes all at once. And so I think probably each of you has a unique and funny story about how you've made it through this.
Yeah, a friend of mine has 9 o'clock. I mean, she's an adult. She's actually a doctor. And after 9 o'clock, she does not talk on the phone. She's not watching the news. She just is chilling, reading a totally disconnected book from current events, and you know, or just spending time with her family. But she sets that at 9 o'clock. I've called her a few minutes before 9, and she's, I'm sorry, we're going to have to talk another day because it's 9 o'clock and that's my kind of timeout time. And I find I tend to want to catch up on the news when I get in bed, and because I don't have time, watch TV during the day. And so I'm trying to watch, but then that makes it hard to go to sleep. There's a lot going on. So it's not really a great way to end the day either.
Yes.
So I think for adults, we need to have a whole nother discussion about, how we set up our routines and to help us be a little bit more at peace these days. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And we do know that regulating our access to media, especially current event media. And so if you want to learn about this day in history 500 years ago, that turned out to not be very stressful. But listen to what's going on today with news updates, whether they're local or national, it actually does have a big impact on people's reactions to calming that we need to do to get into sleep. I also just have to throw out a little, one little tidbit and hopefully a temptation for those of you that don't already have mindfulness activities as part of your daily routines, that mindfulness-based approaches before sleep, so taking some time to even just a 1-minute awareness of my breathing just before bed is such a change in our routines in getting us ready for sleep. And I teach these strategies to individuals of all ages and ability levels as well. And so many people will say, well, mindfulness is something I can do, but it's not something I can teach my child. And I would really encourage you to think about ways to share. There are many ways to do a body scan that don't have to be such technical language. Just counting my breath or feeling my hand rise and fall on my chest, taking a moment to give myself a super, super tight hug and release it. Just strategies like those before bedtime are really also another great to make that transition. And again, many professionals and adults I talk to say, yes, I use mindfulness in my own practice. And I often say, it's okay to share those with those that we live and work with too.
Great ideas.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Carmen, do you have any questions? Or Robert, Ken, Karen, Maribel? All being quiet. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was great. Very
Go ahead.
practical advice, very interesting. Actually, my daughter wandered in as we were doing this and sat down. And then I think she felt like I was getting information that I shouldn't get. She said, you should be listening to this. So it was kind of funny.
Fantastic.
But no, very good. I appreciate it. Even the stuff for ourselves, I like that idea. You're right, it is quite counterintuitive. I've always had the belief of you just stay in bed and don't do anything. But I'm going to be mopping the next time.
Yes, mopping. Yes, it's amazing. And just as you're doing it, no, 80s heavy metal or anything like that on the radio, just mopping.
Oh, now you ruined it.
I know. So, because we're just trying to get you back to bed. We're not trying to get the house out with you. So, yeah, I'm really glad that those are helpful. And again, I think we all have our moments.
Yeah, and mindfulness is really important. There's been some good webinars and Zoom presentations on mindfulness, so people are trying to do that and share that information as well. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that for the future as well.
I was going to say, I'm happy to point out some for that too. And that reminds me, I'm just going to post a couple things in the chat. As I mentioned, I have a couple links, so let me just pull these back out.
And feel free to share your email, Deirdre, if you're comfortable doing that for those who are on the call.
Yes, I sure do.
And just to let the people on the call know that this is being recorded, and by the end of today, it will be on YouTube. And then I will share out the link we upload to YouTube because that makes it accessible. People who need closed captioning or translation into another language can access that through YouTube. So that is our mechanism and our YouTube channel. So you can always access any of our 11 chats, or they're all there already, is California DD Council. So that is our channel on YouTube. So you can always go there and see any of our recordings. Most of the recordings of the chats have our SCDD logo as the little image for them. So you're always welcome to visit any of our previous chats. And while Deirdre is posting her links, our next week is going to be, we have our state council meeting during this time, so we won't be doing a separate chat. You're always welcome to our to attend the council meeting. It will be on Zoom, and you can go to our website, which is, Kathy, maybe you could type in the scdd.ca.gov is our website, and on the home page there should be a link to our council meeting, and the agenda and a packet should be posted there as well, so you can decide when you want to be on and off of that Zoom. It'll be on Zoom council meeting. It's usually about 4 hours long. And then the following week, we will be having Danielle Canarosi with Liberty Dental. That's July 21st, and that's going to be super fun. She's just a fabulous dental community outreach person. She's done trainings with us in some of our adult day programs, and she is all about dental hygiene and her powerful cape and dental superhero. So she makes it a lot of fun. So if you know, from children to adults who have developmental disabilities, encourage them to be on so we can make that really participatory. And she talks about flossing and brushing teeth, and she keeps it real simple and fun. So I hope you can join us on July 21st. And then our last one of this series will be July 28th with Lori Benalis and John Decker with Alta Regional Center for an update on how things are going with some changing policies and regulations at the regional center in the time of COVID-19 and how that's changing some of our options. So we look forward to an update at that time. So it's 11 o'clock. Any final comments, Deirdre?
No, thank you so much for having me and for all of you for taking the time to come today. I added some links in the chat window, including my contact information. If there are any unanswered questions, I'm happy to discuss that further.
Great. So I'll give them a minute for any of you who are on, who want to cut and paste any of those links. And if you miss them, just feel free to email me and we'll get those out to you and connect you with Deirdre. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for your time, Deirdre. Really appreciate your expertise and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And thank you all for spending this hour with us, and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.